Norman, let's start with you if we could. We're here to talk about the evolution of Miami cuisine. And I think before you can get to that, we have to talk about the evolution of Florida cuisine. You're too modest, maybe, probably, to say this, but I mean, you're kind of the catalyst for a lot of what we're talking about. I wonder if you could just talk about what it was, because, I always feel like, and I'm from here, and I've always picked up on it. Miami, on the back of Mike's shirt, it says Miami against the world, right? And there is kind of for whatever reason, there's something about the climate, the location, where we are on the map, all this stuff. I think it took a while for this city to get the respect it deserved. But I'm curious, when you first came down here, what was it that drew you to the foods down here, to the ingredients here, and to just the state itself? What was it when you came down to Key West in your car that was like, this is where I want to plant my flag, this is, and I'm going to start cooking this stuff?
I didn't come down here in my car because I didn't have a car. I was hitchhiking and...
hitchhiking, sorry. A car.
And I was just trying to get as far out of winter as I could, and my best friend's older brother had gotten in a little trouble with a legal situation, and I said, "Where's your brother?" And they said, "This is the late night party," and they said, "Key West." I said, "Where's that?" And they said, "You go to Miami and keep going." I said, "Does anybody want to go?" And two guys that were at the party said, "Yeah, let's go." I said, "When do you want to go?" "Let's go tonight." So 36 hours later, we rolled into Key West. And I think that, Andrew, had a whole lot to do with what changed me from a Midwesterner. When I say what changed me was Key West. I feel that I had I had a place to live in that was not. It was more blunt. It was more uncut, straight ahead. You had Cuban food, Haitian food, Bahamian food, of course. You had Southern food, and it wasn't continental, which was what was going on in American cities for the most part. I love the fact, jumping back for a moment, that you had the Great Chefs of France book up on there. That was a huge book for me. But I'm self-taught, did not go to school. I started in a diner because I got fired from being a roofer. But the transitions that were going on in the United States in the late 70s, mid-70s, late 70s, that you also talked about, and is in your great book, began to create an awareness in me that, wow, there's a California cuisine, and there is a Southwestern cuisine, and this was all emerging very quickly, and there was no internet yet, but there were the magazines, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, probably even better illustration as far as catching the stories of the regional American cuisines that were developing. Being in Key West and falling in love with Latin and Caribbean flavors in situ, in the situation. I remember the first time I had caramelized plantains and at dinner, and I'm a Midwestern, I'm like, why are there bananas at dinner? But then somebody said, basically, shut up and eat it. And I was like, it changed me, quickly changed me. This could be a very long story if I let it go, but the transition for me became, okay, great. I mean, I loved and dedicated my first book to Alice Waters and James Beard. I loved what was going on, and I really thought about maybe I should just go there to California and be a part of that movement, Jeremiah Tower. But then something inside of me said, somebody should do this here. And there was no one that was giving voice to the eclectic, disparate cultures that were going on here. And I felt like this is just a perfect place because there were so many different inspirations. The food, the different ways food was being made. I had a carte blanche sense of what I could do, and nobody was going to tell me otherwise. So at Louis' Backyard, as we met when I first walked in, we were talking for a moment about John Sedler, one of the fathers of the American Southwestern cuisine. And I was very aware of Santa Stuff and the changes that John inculcated with that menu and in that time. And it was just like, the menus originally at Louis were handwritten. I was changing them every night. Drove everybody insane. But fortunately, I came up to Miami. I hated to leave Key West in many ways, but I had to, or I was going to get tattoos and a nickname. And the tattoos would probably be fine now, but back then it was a little. But the nickname, maybe, I don't know. But I came up here and coming to Miami in '95 and opening up on Ocean Drive. Well, no, I'm sorry. Coming up to Miami in '91 and opening up on Ocean Drive. Then the explosion of the very much more myriad cuisines that were going on, the things that you could tap into, not in Key West, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, you name it, was all there. And I was going to the markets like Palacio de los Jugos and just rocked by the things that I now had in the toolbox. And the toolbox is everything.
I love all that. And I remember when I interviewed you for my book, for Chefs, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, I was down here just to see you, and you said, I want you to meet me at Palacio de Jugos, right?
We did.
And we did the interview over lunch there, because you wanted me to look around. Before I ask Mike my first question for him, I'm curious to know, how much do you think not having formal training kept you open-minded enough to make the leaps you made that you just described? Coming down to Key West, saying someone needs to do something with this food, going about it in your way, shutting out these other voices. Do you feel like you would have been able to do that if you had gone through like a 2-year French training at one of the institutes?
I would have been kicked out of school, no problem. I would not have listened to it very much. I love education. I think education is the most important thing that just about you could ever have about any aesthetic whatsoever. But there was too much of this is the way we do it. What you're talking about is nonsense, or what you're thinking about is just outside of the the Eurocentric way of looking at things. And I felt like no, absolutely not. I almost went to school, but when I told my chef, who'd graduated from CIA, that I was going to go to school and I needed her to write a recommendation, she said, bullshit, I'll give you the sous chef job and you can come here and make more money. And you already know half of what we went to school for, but I just got to show you some more of the stuff. And so I didn't go to school, but I do have an honorary doctorate.
It wasn't a dig.
No big deal. No big
Okay,
deal.
Mike, can you talk to me about, talk to me about a little bit about how the role that food played in your childhood here in Miami, given your family's heritage. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit as you kind of came into young adulthood, right, adolescence. Just what was your perception of what, you wouldn't have called it probably a Miami cuisine, but what was your perception and experience of dining in Miami?
It's interesting because when I was younger, the only food I did know was Cuban food, Caribbean food, until I moved away. And then I was like, so not every gas station has pastelitos, and I was really concerned. Not every corner sells Cuban coffee. My relationship with food was, this is all I knew. And it was a very community-oriented situation. All my fondest memories are Christmas Eve, cajachinas, big family, yuca, moro, just all that stuff that feels very family-driven, very community-driven. When I moved to the South for college, I was introduced to a bunch of new food that's also delicious, but a different way of life that I wasn't super familiar with, but also opened my eyes to different flavors and flavor profiles that also still fascinate me. I would say that how that evolved over time was understanding that our flavors can be applied in different dynamics. And I'm just gonna piggyback on something he said, which is like formal training. I think formal training, albeit very important, teaches you how to think within a box And Chef Norman told me that the box was optional. And I think that's something that with our cuisine, as I was a young cook, they really drill into you structure, which is somewhat important, but it also dulls your creativity and also only makes you look through one lens. When our flavor profiles and just the incredible expanse of food that we have in South Florida, in the Caribbean, you can apply those flavors in so many different ways, and no one really tells you that.
And Norman, you've had restaurants in many different parts of Florida. When you would open, say, in Coral Gables, or when you would open in Orlando, or was the state kind of monolithic to you at some point? Like, did you do? You have a repertoire. At a certain point in one's career, you have a repertoire, but you're also constantly coming up with new things, and you have a team maybe that's coming up with ideas. Did you think differently about different cities in the state of Florida?
Yeah, because I think as a chef, you feel like they're going to make me make the same dishes for the rest of my life, they being the customers. And I wanted to escape my own dishes. I'm sure lots of musicians and other types of artists feel like I'm not a one-trick pony. I can do more things than you could shrimp. God bless the fact that it paid a lot of bills, my repertoire began in Key West, expanded it when I opened Norman's and continued. But I'll tell you, Andrew, it's like at Norman's Orlando, it's pretty much it's like going to see the Eagles in concert in a way to me. It's like if you don't play the certain song, they're going to be mad. So when I did the project, for instance, I didn't change so much when I went from Miami to Orlando, but when I had the opportunity to do the project in Mount Dora, that gave me a chance to kind of put a lot of the signature dishes, leave them where they were, and then do a more southern style, because ironically, as many people who live here know, the further north you go, the more southern the food becomes in the middle of the state and the northern part of the state. So I purposefully sought about to set a new playlist, and that's how I've done most of my books too. The books have always been a chance to let's go explore something much different. When I did the New World Kitchen book, that book, 7 books, it gets very confusing. But that book was the book I did with Dan Halpern, your friend. And it represented over 25 countries. I knew nothing about so much of what I was about to say I'm going to write about. But that's precisely the reason I wanted to do the book, was I wanted to indoctrinate myself with the knowledge of the people from all these different countries, which gave me, it didn't show up so much on the a la carte menu, but on my tasting menus, then because people were not so locked in anymore, I could go crazy with the tasting menus, showing the dishes that I really was learning about, loving, by exploring Miami and talking to people who were on my staff, sometimes the customers too, and just gave me a chance to branch out.
Great, thank you. Mike, can you talk, we've talked about the early days of Ariette and how it wasn't a menu that resembled the menu you have there today. And I'm curious to know, because what you do now just seems so organic, right? It seems like it comes from you, it seems very personal, it seems very much of Miami. But I'm curious to know if the reason you didn't do that initially was, was it something you always wanted to do and didn't think you could sell at that moment in time? Or did it not come to you to even think to do what you do now, a decade or so ago?
I think anyone in this room that's opened up any kind of business knows that when you open, it's scary. So at the beginning, I kind of went with things that I knew and that I thought people would like and that they would order. The pressure cooker that is the opening of your first restaurant, I mean, all of them really, but the first one, when nobody knows your name and you want to get recognized and you want to cook your food, it's tough. So I think that it was fear. why I shied away from those things. And really, it was getting down to that like bottom of the barrel, like I don't know if we're gonna make it out of this kind of scenario. To just say fuck it, let's cook some food that we really care about, and if we go down the way that we want to be remembered. I don't know what happened at that point, but people started to return, and I think that our voice was heard, and I think it was heard because we were reflecting what the city already liked. The flavors that they understood, the things that mattered to them, that spoke to the community, that spoke to the city in general, and that spoke to so many flavor profiles that we all grew up with. I think that there was small points within the menu from when we opened that were good and that are still there, but I think that the overall theme, we talk about music all the time, and it's like, I think when you look at a great album, it all kind of just flows together. And I think at the beginning, it was like a bunch of like decent singles, and now it's just like a great album. And whenever it changes, like, does this make sense rhythmically with the rest of the menu? What the restaurant represents, the city, the time frame, so on and so forth. So, and now we're just in a place that we're completely comfortable in our own shoes. And if people don't like it, I mean, there's 800,000 restaurants in the city. You can visit those, because who we are and what we represent, I think it's already, we're good with that.
Yeah. I'd love to get both your guys' reaction to what I'm about to say. So I had a moment, I told you about it, Mike. I was at your Chug's Diner on a Saturday for breakfast, I guess, and you had potato pancakes on the menu, and one of the dipping sauces is guava. Okay, so that's a Jewish staple and a Cuban staple, right? And I called you, I was so tickled when Donald asked me to do this thing about Miami cuisine, because I said, I think this is Miami cuisine. I had never used that phrase before. And when I kept thinking about it, and I feel like, because you also do a pull from generally from New American. Like we were talking at lunch today, you had JW potatoes on the menu. Those are Jonathan Waxman's famous potatoes from Barbudo. You just call them JW.
Which I had 4 days ago.
Yes.
At Barbudo.
Yeah, they're killer. If you ever go to New York, go get the potatoes at Barbudo.
Don't skip the potatoes.
But I was at dinner once there. We had 3 people, and by the end of the dinner, we had each had a full platter of potatoes. But in any event, here's the thing I'd love to know if you guys agree or disagree with. I feel like when I was growing up in the city, so there's this term melting pot, right? Meaning everything comes together. I wouldn't describe Miami culinarily as a melting pot.
I felt describe America as a melting pot.
Well, we don't have time for that today. But
I said I don't, just to be
clear.
clear.
I understand. I mean,
Okay.
yes, right. I mean, I live in New York, which I kind of feel is, but I feel like here, culinarily, that's what struck me when I had that moment at your restaurant, that, it's not like, I have to go here and eat Cuban food. I have to go to this deli to eat like a Jewish staple. I have to go over here for New American. It was like, this stuff is all on the same menu here, right? And I feel like those walls have kind of come down. And to me, that's Miami cuisine, to me. But I don't even live here anymore. So I'd love, is that the beginning of a definition?
Go ahead, man.
I mean, I don't know about a definition. I think it shows, and not just that dish specifically, but I think throughout the city you see a lot more confidence. It's been time. People like Chef Norman and others have really paved the way for us to be like, you guys you can cook. Like, you don't just have to do like cookie cutter, Italian food or whatever. I mean, restaurants live in boxes. Not everything needs to be Cheesecake Factory. You could start to be confident in the kind of things that you want to do, because I think that the diner wants to see some more perspective. That dish specifically, when people ask me some of my favorite dishes, is a top 3 dish because 1, it's delicious. 2, I think it shows so much creativity and fun. And, food doesn't always need to be so serious. We can have some fun with it. And that one specifically, I think just nails everything. Also, like my love for like a Jewish deli, you know, my love for a diner, my love for, you know, frituras. They're all, now it's like a little baby on a plate, and I love that. You know, defining something, I think, there's not enough time for all of that either. But I think it shows that the city is much more confident because, and I think it's been a recurring theme over the last 2 days that I've heard a couple times, which is, you know, Miami wasn't looked at or has not been looked at as a dining destination. And I incredibly disagree with that. We have been for quite some time. I think now people are just listening because they're stopping to just go to South Beach. There's other parts of the city. So I think that's really what it shows the most of.
Do you want to end, or are we good?
Well, I'll say the F word. This book here changed my life. I meant to bring Drug, Sex, and Chef's Rock and Roll, but actually it's in my bag over there.
Oh.
This book changed my life. This is called Culture and Cuisine by a Frenchman named Jean-François Revel. How this book fell into my hands, I can only think is divine intervention, because it's not a cookbook, and it's a book about the sociology, the changing of food from the time of Taillevent through the Gaumont, the movement of the Nouvelle Cuisine, right? Mm-hmm. In this book, which spans 300 or 400 years of history, this Frenchman goes into how humankind has constantly gone back and forth in a lover's quarrel, those are his terms, a lover's quarrel between aristocratic food, fancy food, technical food, and rustic food, the mother food, constantly over the course of time. And it doesn't all happen in the world at one time. And, you know, in this part of the world, it could be going back and forth in a different way than in this part of the world. And I'm like, exactly. It is not, I was at a point in my life, a crossroads in my life, where I was like, am I going to always be looking to do fancy food, but while I'm loving what I'm tasting in the rustic places? And I realized in this book, I found a sense of permission to create what I called fusion cuisine. I'm the first person to use that term in regards to cuisine. Fusion does exist in science and exists in music, but nobody had used that term before. I wrote an essay for myself to figure out what I was going to do, and I had not done that before. I felt a little bit like the character in Close Encounters, making mashed potatoes and going a little crazy, you know, when I was writing this thing, because I was writing it and writing it, rewriting it, and giving it to the poor woman who worked with me in the office, like, what are you doing with this piece of paper? I said, I don't know, but I have to figure this out. Then, coincidentally, I was asked to go to Santa Fe and give a speech on why you cook the way you cook. This was 1989. And on stage with me that morning were Charlie, Emerald, Tom Douglas, and Lydia Shire. We were all asked the same question. When they asked me to come to Santa Fe and give that speech, I'm like, what would I give a speech on? I mean, I'm a cook. I'm a chef. I don't give speeches. I don't know how I would do that. And in that audience that day was the who's who of American food, journalists included, Ella Brennan, I mean, many. And I nervously read the paper. One of the journalists, Regina Schrambling, wrote about this clever young man from Key West who wrote this speech and called it, or put this, promulgated the idea of fusion cooking, and it went out on the AP Wire. So without me having any precognition as far as wanting to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to go to Santa Fe and tell people about this thing, which I think people will be talking about, some malignantly and some positively, 30, 40 years later, but there it is. And it came because of me running into this book and hearing about a lover's quarrel. Because this is what it is. I mean, what we're all doing, I mean, whether we want to say we're authentic or not, I mean, you can't be cooking authentic Italian food in let's say 1700, if you're using tomatoes, because they didn't exist, or maybe 1600. But the point is, constantly in the form of change. Human beings. You might marry someone who is from another country. What's going to happen at the family table? You may go to another country, unfortunately, because you're going to serve in the war. What's going to happen to you tasting food in that other country? We are malleable. We are forever in change, and we're very curious. Human beings are incredibly curious. And if somebody makes something, Michael said something I think is so important. The first thing he said about the relevance of a dish was, is it delicious? I think too many chefs have gotten to the point where they want to go, did you get it? Did you understand it? Do you know what I'm telling you? If you pick up the seashell and listen to it, when you hear the ocean and you eat the soup, get it? That to me is bullshit. No, you can't. Art it needs to be able to affect you emotionally without having a set of instructions. And so this is what we seek. I think all of us are seeking for the opportunity for people to come into the restaurant, taste your soup, taste your noodles, taste whatever it is, and you begin to go, I don't care if this is Vietnamese or this is French, as long as it makes me have a memory. And that's what I seek to do over and over again, is create something that people feel that they are going to go home and wake up the next morning and be able to remember to talk about.
That's great. Thank you. I'd love to get your guys' answer to this. I'm put in mind of something Jonathan Waxman once said to a journalist years ago about when he was at Michael's restaurant in Los Angeles. And he was talking about the receptiveness of the diners of Los Angeles at that time. And he said, I can put anything I want in front of my diners, in front of my guests, as long as it's not the thing they ate yesterday. And what he was talking about was he was free to make mistakes. He was free to try new things. I'm curious to know how the dining public here, I mean, this is you just talked about, the interaction between what you cook and people eating it. Right. I'm curious to know how the dining public here has changed in the last several years, or whatever time frame you want to put to it, because it's like they say, show business is two things, right? Show and business. You need people receptive to what you're doing to do it. So I'm curious to know if you feel like there's been a greater adventurousness in the people coming into restaurants here in the last, pick your time frame.
You want to start?
Miami against the world goes.
Wow, that's such a loaded question because I've been asked that so many times. I think, so from 10 years ago, the way that our menus evolved, and I think across the company, Ariat specifically, and you could even add Chugs in there, but I've often heard, well, no one's going to order that. And I'm like, so how do you know? And then the response is like, yeah, they're just not. I'm like, is it because you are scared to do it, or is it because you actually think that they're not gonna? And the response is always like, it's crickets after that, because there's no response. You don't know. And for so long, it was like, the duck press, no one's gonna order it. I mean, we sell out every night. I mean, it seems like people like it. When we added foie to the menu at the beginning, I think that's too much. I mean, I'd been cooking foie for this man for like years, thousands of foies under my belt. So people do order it. And it is another one that was a banger and sold all the time. Whatever we did, goat, pasta, monkfish, rawan sindio, you name it. Several times, I got several people like, I don't know if the public is ready for that. But I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. We don't know, we haven't tried. And I think, again, it goes back to the confidence conversation. I think Miami now is more willing to just fucking wing it and see if people are gonna order food than just be fearful. There's plenty of restaurants that do bolognese and penne alla vodka and those kind of things that are coming from other places, and people still go there, and that's fine. But there's plenty of Miami restaurants that actually represent what the city stands for, which is our flavor profiles, who we are, the kind of cuisine that we represent, just like this incredible place. So, short answer is yes. I think that the clientele has definitely broadened, but when I worked for Chef 2, they used to order all kinds of things also. So I don't know if it's really broadened. I think just more people are willing to take the risk.
It's what I find it's crazy to me is that I have to push my staff to allow change. I'm like, the menu's not laminated. We can change it tomorrow. If you want to come in with a great idea, you tasted something somewhere, let's taste it, in the afternoon. Let's see where we go. It was great to have Michael with me working in a few of the restaurants because he was gung ho all the way to to fly by the seat of our pants and see what we could get to.
All right, we have time for just a question or two if we have. Yes, within the pink shirt.
Miguel Massans, everyone. Clap it up for Miguel Massans. Local legend, everybody.
Hello. Buenas tardes a todos. So I had the distinct pleasure of being one of the last chef de cuisines for the gentleman on the left. And the gentleman on my right, I feud with him all the time about Belen versus Columbus. Something that I've always, I've had this conversation with many people about the evolution of Miami cuisine. I've spoken about this with Nidal, actually many, many years ago, outside of, what was the bakery? Zach the Baker. Something that people don't really, and this isn't really a question, it's more of a commentary, and then you gentlemen can riff on it. Something that people don't think about is that Miami is still a very young city, right? I always tell people, compare ourselves to Rome or Istanbul or Paris. We're babies, right? Sure, Miami started with the Indians and whatnot, and you could say Coconut Grove 100 years ago, but really it wasn't until the 60s, 70s, 80s when this city began to flourish. And I always do the analogy of a football player, right? Quarterback out of college, signs a $50 million deal. What's the first thing he's gonna do when he gets all that money? He's gonna go buy a Ferrari, right? He's not responsible. He's young, he's ignorant. And Miami, unfortunately, we grew up very fast. We signed that $50 million deal. We got the Ferraris. We got the high rises in Brickell, whether it was cocaine cowboys or not, whatever it is. But we got a lot of money very quickly, right? Compare that to, again, one of these old cities like Istanbul or something, where there was millennia of struggle, okay? Here we just got it fast. So what does the person that has that immediate wealth access, what do you start to say? Well, I'm gonna be flashy, and I want things now. And I think that right now, Miami is struggling through some of that identity crisis at times. Because we always say, well, we're as good as New York. We're as good as Chicago or LA. Or we're as good as Paris or whoever. Maybe, in some aspects, but in the gastronomy, we have made some incredible strides, thanks to these two gentlemen. But we still have a lot more way to go, right? So I always say, okay, well, let's look at New York as an example. There was a lot of gentrification there, right? Imagine the cultural wars going on between Little Italy and Chinatown and what that looked like. And people getting upset, hey, you're coming into my territory and this and whatnot. We're seeing that here with Wynwood, Little Haiti, right? But how many generations had to go of Italian grandmothers until we got a Mario Carbone? Many. And Miami, we're still only, in my opinion, Michael and I are of the first Cuban-American generation, right? Thankfully, we have talent, thanks to mentors like Norman, that we can put some of our stamp, right? Like Michael has done with Ariete. 10 years is an incredible run, right? Very few people are able to do that.
I can't believe this.
But I always look and I say, well, okay, we're the young city, we have all the flash, we have all these things, we have so much potential, like they're saying, about the fusion cuisine and all the cultures. However, we're letting Mario Carbone dictate who our canvas, he's painting our canvas. The canvas is still blank, but we're letting somebody else paint it for us. And I think that that's the big risk that Miami, as both diners, as chefs, and as people that work in the industry, whether you're PR or real estate or what have you, landlords, whatnot, we're making a risk because right now is the moment more than ever where the light is shining on our city and we're letting somebody else paint the canvas, right? Thank God that Michael has Arieta and he has a lease for 20 or 30 years or whatever it is, because he's smiling, because he'll continue to fly that flag and he'll continue to cook in that way. And you know, the dream here is to say, okay, how can we convince more of these young Miami-born chefs to also move in that direction, right? And I think that that's what we need to, as an industry, this is the challenge that I give to a lot of the people in this room. I love the Carbones and all these steakhouses and the sushi and all these incredible things are delicious. However, we need to also put more focus on who we really are as a community that lives and breathes and eats here, right? Because at the end of the day, we're the ones responsible for creating what Miami cuisine really is. Thank you.
Thank you. If I'd like to respond, we are technically over, but go ahead and riff away.
Breaking the rules. Perfect.
What's changed so much, aside from the food and the money, is journalism. I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a time in my business to where there was a food journalism that existed not only in Miami but around the country and elsewhere, where you could count on people who could get the word out, and the word would not be influenced by the influencers, and not that there's anything wrong with some of them, but I mean, there was no steadfast voice. There was no, the Walter Cronkite voice in news. There was not that. There was that in Miami. Some people won't remember Lucy Cooper, who was one of the first journalists that wrote for the Miami Herald for a long period of time. Maricel Presilla, another great one who wrote for the Miami Herald for a long time. Of course, the internet didn't exist. The voluminous amount of noise that comes out about this opinion and that opinion and this and Yelp and all of the other stuff. I mean, people are confused. The dining public is at a bit of a loss. There's so much babble in the universe of it all, and where are they supposed to go next? And so many people get so like, wow, there's lines that go around the block for a steak that's got gold on it, and it's in a box, and all of that. I mean, and I feel so crushed for people who are your age and your age. In many ways, I mean, first off, of course, the pandemic, but not having the voice of people who have the kind of the repertoire to speak intelligently about food in ways that sustain a culture and give nurture to a culture. We need it. We need to have that, because the clientele, the people who would come to the restaurants, they're confused. Word of mouth, that's what made Norman's super powerful. The people came to that restaurant and went, oh, you're here, and you're a neighbor, or you're here, and you're not from one community, there was a mix of the communities. But I would just remark that we're missing the voice of good journalism in the city. Not that there aren't good journalists, but they're not commanding the same scope of people's attention.
Okay. So I think that we can overarchingly talk about that there's several reasons why. I agree with so many things that you said, and that we can look at all the bad things that are happening, because, I mean, there's a laundry list. But I'm going to read a thing, and then I'm going to tell you why, since we've turned 10, why this is what I pretty much read to myself every day. That you are here, that life exists, an identity, the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute the verse, what will your verse be? And we can continue to talk about all these extracurricular things that are outside of our control. because they are all out of our control. People don't write anymore about real food. Everything is a top 10 list about French fries. We could talk about how real estate has absolutely tanked the restaurant industry. We could talk about supply lines. We could talk about how guests like big sparklers on their cakes. We could talk about so many things. But the reality is what you and I have a responsibility to do is to show the world what real food and what real Miami food is. And it sucks, right? There's days that it's lonely because everyone's having a penne alla vodka on the fucking beach, but the reality is that we're here to continue our story. And so many, it's just bludgeoning sometimes, right? Like, it's exhausting because maybe you don't have French fries, so you don't make the top 10 list, so then you cry about it. Or you don't win an award, or you don't make a list, or whatever it is. We still go back to work the next day doing the same thing for the same purpose. And over the last 10 years, I think what can talk about like the biggest change from year 1 to year 10 is that the extracurricular noise, like, I don't know if anyone likes sports movies, but for Love of the Game, Kevin Costner, right? He's like, clear the mechanism. Fuck, it's so much noise. There's so much noise about what's wrong in the world in general, but if you talk about our industry, forget about it. Clear the mechanism. Cutting board food, good humans around you, good people that believe in what you do, what I do, what he does, what everyone in this room does. That's what matters. Because, again, and I say this now, and I'm not saying that there's not days that I absolutely want to grab my head and drive it through a wall, because that happens pretty often, but the reality is I have to center myself again to remind myself why we do this. We are the first generation of Cuban Americans. My kids will be second. So I want them to be like, my dad's cool. He did this thing. Now I should do something cool too. That's the only way this is going to work at all whatsoever.
All right. Perfect place to stop. I know you just did some clapping, but once again, can you give it up for Mike Beltran and Norman Van Aken?